Hey, everybody. So, for this episode, we had initially planned to cover all of Stephen Hassan's BITE model when talking about how to identify a cult. And it wound up going a little bit longer than we expected. So, now it's going to be a full-part series. So, this will be B, and then we're going to post the I, followed by obviously the T, and then the E. So some of them might end a little abruptly, or they might be a little choppy, but that's why. So we hope you enjoy.
We'll see you at I.
Yes.
Do not include that.
Oh, I'm so including that.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Week in the Weird. Thanks for joining us. Today, we thought we would take some time and talk about how to identify a cult.
So part of the reason I guess we want to talk about this is because it's really hard to kind of put your finger on what a cult actually is. And I think we're getting understanding how the organizations work and all that stuff is helping. But like the definition in the dictionary is like a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. And I don't know if that's helpful to anybody here, but
It's definitely not helpful to me.
no.
So one of the things that we found helpful for thinking through our experience and kind of processing whether we were actually in a cult is Steve Hassan's BITE model, BITE model for identifying, I don't know if it's for identifying cults or identifying high control groups.
Stephen Hassan's BITE model of authoritarian control.
Okay.
That's what it is. It clearly spells out the criteria used by cults, manipulative Bible-based religious groups, and oppressive individuals to suppress the uniqueness and creativity of their followers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we get started with this, we wanted to just kind of let everyone know that this isn't a checklist for figuring out if some group is a cult. It's a good set of criteria and a good way of kind of thinking about whether a group is taking away its members' autonomy and their control over their own lives. So as we get into this, just remember, and Sarah, you said this earlier, it's so important to follow your gut. If you have a gut feeling that something's not right with the group that you're in or with a group that a loved one's in, pay attention to that because that's valuable.
Yeah. And I think it's also important because I think different personality types and different temperaments react to control and authority in different ways. So it could just be that a group doesn't feel right to you. It doesn't even have to be like a cult. But if you're going, this feels controlling and I don't feel like this is right, then take a minute and step away. Because we were talking about it a little while ago, like step away, take a breath, figure it out. And then if they're not a cult and if they're not some really controlling group, they'll welcome you back with no punishment and no judgment.
It's true.
So yeah, and this is just, it's a great list. And I think it's a great starting point for like just thinking and critically thinking about groups and churches and relationships and any really interpersonal situation that you're in.
I think that's true.
Yeah. And we're going to go through and talk a little bit about some of our experiences. And with that as well, it's like when we start comparing our experiences with other people's, it can get kind of tricky because different interactions can be harmful for certain individuals that might not seem so bad for others. And it doesn't mean anybody's right or wrong. It just means that, we all deserve to live our own lives and be happy and fulfilled and not in fear.
It's true. And I think the idea is, this is one model that has really helped us, like I said, process our experiences. So the reason that we're going to talk about things that happened is to kind of give context for
Mm-hmm.
how we're using this to think through
Yep.
the group that we were in
Yeah.
and what life was like in the group.
Yeah. Yes. And something else that's really interesting is we call the ICOC, the International Churches of Christ, and the ICC, the International Christian Church, cults, not just on our own, but
Very true.
almost every cult expert I know of that I've ever heard talk, they're on their radar. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the Freedom of Mind Center, the ICOC, ICC is on their list of cults, and there are other
Cult
watch
watch.
groups,
Yes.
that have it's listed. So it's not
Yeah.
fairyland.
Yes,
Mhm.
we're not just coming up with this completely out of left field on our own.
Right. And I will say too, like, it's only for me, but in the last like year that I've gotten to the point where I'm like, holy crap, that was really a cult.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and this model helped me because I was like, it helped me not feel crazy.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
Because I kind of went through like this evolution where at first I still really believed the doctrine of the ICOC. And as I moved away from that, I thought of the ICOC as a church that I just had a really bad experience in.
Right.
And then as I got further away, I started calling it, I would tell people that I was in a high control religious group. But like you, it's been pretty recently that I've actually started really using the word cult without much hesitation.
Right.
So I believe that we were in a cult.
Yes. And I'll say shout out to Leah Remini because I was
Yes.
watching the Scientology thing and I was like, holy crap. That's like, and now that I know more, there are so many similarities. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can relate to that person, and maybe our experiences weren't exactly the same, but that control,
but the dynamic
behavior,
was the
yes,
same.
exactly.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, this is because everybody's like Scientology. That's a cult,
Ooh, yes.
Well, yeah. I was like, well, we're in line with that, and we're on lists with not we, the ICOC and the ICC are literally listed on. You can go to these websites, and it's the ICOC and Scientology and Satan worshipers. Like they're all. It's like
Yes,
it's like
and the Moonies.
and the Moonies.
Yep.
And like it's no joke.
Yes.
And so that's a whole nother conversation for another thing, is like it's no joke, and that's kind of hard to come to grips with.
Yes.
But for now, should we talk a little bit more about the BITE model and
Sure. So when we talk about the BITE model, BITE is an acronym, and it stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. So interesting. I'm looking at the cover page of the little BITE model chart from the Freedom of Mind Resource Center.
Yep.
And it talks about how the BITE model it explains the 4 overlapping components of control necessary to define undue influence. And that members of pseudo-religious groups and cults subjected to undue influence can live in their own homes, have 9-to-5 jobs, be married with children, and still be unable to think for themselves or act independently. And I think that is key. That goes back to, you can't just look at a group and identify it as a cult.
Right.
You have to really, it's a lot more subtle than that. And you have to look at what's going on in the relationships within the group, which makes it tricky, because once you're deep enough in the group that you might be in a position to analyze the relationships, you're already under the group's control.
Right.
That makes it hard.
Yes. Yeah, and it's also interesting because we'll go into excuse me, goodness, talking about like behavior control and that kind of stuff. But you can have people. So we had our own house. People lived in their own homes and went to college, but were we really, when we were told where we could live, told where we could go to college, told like how much money you have to give to church, which means that's all that you only have the remainder of that for your mortgage and all your bills and all these things. So you're technically living in your own home, but you're not. You didn't have the choice. You didn't make the choice necessarily to live there and to go to school there and to work. Like, you were told where you could and couldn't work.
It's true.
So
yep.
Everything is not as it seems.
Yes.
That's the thing. And when someone tells you something's wrong, believe them.
Yep.
So
it's true. God, there you go. That's it.
Bye. And that ends our whole podcast ever.
Yep. Our work here is done.
Right.
So the B in BITE model stands for behavior control. And behavior control, the goal of behavior control is to instill dependency and obedience. So there are a bunch of different ways that a group can control its members' behavior. I'm looking at a handout that explains the BITE model. And the first bullet point under behavior control is regulate individuals' physical reality.
Yes. And for the handout, we'll put a link to it in the description for this podcast, because it's really helpful.
Check it out. It's very, yeah, it is.
It is. It's really good. But yeah, regulate individuals' physical reality. And so that one to me was kind of confusing. And so I did a little researching, and it's really just like controlling aspects of how a person lives. So it could be how you clean your house, and then I thought about it too, like, you are expected to have a clean house. Like, there was no mess, there was organization. But it made me think of whenever I was in campus and I moved in. I was put into this apartment with 3 other college students, sisters. And they, even within that, they had the pyramid where there was one person who was at the top. And so she was the one who made the chore chart and decided how the rotations were going to go. So there's that. But the one thing that I remember more than anything else at that time, like, I had no money. I ate a lot of like canned tuna. And the other thing was, we all went grocery shopping together, and we all had like Devo. So we all had to have, in addition to all the other time we spent at church and with cult members, we had to every week be there for a certain number of hours with each other. And like, she would lead some kind of a, spiritual Bible, whatever. And sometimes we would just watch Saturday Night Live, and I would watch them be really weird and gross. But anyway, but we all went grocery shopping together, and we brought the groceries back. And as I started pulling my stuff out, the first time we ever went shopping together, I was informed that my tuna, I could eat it. However, if I open that can, the can must be rinsed thoroughly before put in the trash, which I'm like, not a bad idea. However, it was because the college student in charge didn't like tuna, didn't like the smell of tuna, it grossed her out. So that's how it was done.
That was the rule.
That was the rule. And I was like, okay, I'm easygoing. But I look back and I'm like, a whole bunch of those little rules made up my whole life.
Yes. Oh, and in a healthy roommate relationship,
yes,
what would have happened is the roommate who doesn't like tuna says, I don't like tuna. I can't stand the smell. Do you mind if you just could you rinse it out before you put it in the trash? And you go, okay.
Right.
And that's the end.
Yep.
You don't have one person dictating how the other person is going to behave.
Yeah. It was just like, yeah, one of many things that I was like, this is not going to work for me. Not at all. But so I don't know if you have any of those where it's just like controlling your daily priorities. A lot of that.
And I'm not thinking of anything off. I'm sure there was, but I'm not thinking of any examples off the top of my head. But but that leads into the next thing on the list, which is dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives and associates or isolates.
Yeah.
And I have lots of examples of that.
Like your whole life.
Yes. You just gave one that you were in college and you were told who your roommates were going to be and what apartment you were going to live in.
Yes. And that was it.
And the same thing happened to our brother. He was placed in brothers' households
which were not good.
No, not at all. Not very, very, very unhealthy. So that didn't happen so much for me, but that's only because I was in the ICOC in high school and for almost all of my freshman year of college, but I lived at home while I was going to college. Then I left the ICOC and I got married before I came back. That's the only reason that I wasn't placed in a household with other sisters. Yeah. However, there were very strict expectations surrounding how far away from church you should live. So like when I came back to church, my sector was in a certain area of the suburbs, and we lived pretty far away from that area. We lived out in the country. It was more affordable. It was closer. I was going to school. It was closer to school. The only reason that was acceptable was because my husband wasn't in the church. If we had been in the church, there would have been immense pressure to move closer to town or closer to where we met on midweeks.
Yep. Yeah. And it goes down to like who you live and associate with. Like that was my whole high school. Like you weren't allowed to be friends with people who weren't in the kingdom. They were in the world. And so, like,
yeah. So you could have superficial friendships with people from school if you were trying to convert them.
Yep.
If you're trying to recruit them.
Yep. That was
otherwise it was a waste of time. And I remember hearing the example. This is so disgusting thinking about it now. But because we had the truth and we were supposed to be so righteous, did anyone ever give you the example of you don't want to spend too much time with people, worldly kids from school? Because imagine that you're standing on a chair or on a pedestal. Is it easier for you to pull people up to your level, or is it easier for them to pull you down off of your pedestal?
That sounds familiar. Yeah, now I'd be like, well, first of all, why am I on a pedestal?
Yes, that's an excellent question.
And also, if I was on a pedestal or if I was whatever, I'd be hoisting people up because I'd be passionate about it and I'd be well grounded. So,
and we were supposed to have the Holy Spirit and we were supposed to have the power of God behind us.
Right.
So wouldn't
behind,
that give us strength?
not under. Yes, so that does.
That was just thinking back on that. That's absurd. I would never. I'm thinking about my kid. I would never tell him that.
No.
I would like, oh my gosh, he is a great guy. He's not better than any of his friends.
Right.
Like that's just audacious.
Yes, it's audacious.
Isn't it? I mean, like,
yes, no, it is. And it's that whole thing. It's the us versus them. And we have the answer. And honestly, like we can get away with stuff. It's like we get away with being jerks, like really. And we, as in, I don't know that I ever felt that way. I felt beat down a lot. Like I was like, this is a weird pedestal. And I really don't want anybody to, I don't want to drag it. There's a reason people don't want to be dragged onto this pedestal. Like seriously,
It's true.
But yeah, so it was just a controlling of everybody, including family members that you couldn't hang out with because they weren't, you could only hang out so long. And yeah. So
it's true.
So number 3, we'll go through some of these. There are 25 on this list, but the reality is that there are like infinite ways that people can control your behavior.
It's true.
That's just it.
Yes.
But so when, how, and with whom the member has sex, that wasn't really a thing, but the dating was for me.
Was. And I mean, in a way it was, because obviously,
well,
if you weren't married, you better not be having sex with anyone.
Which most teens were.
If you were married, depending on who your discipleship partner was, there could be some
They were all up in your business.
some strong advice about
Yeah.
what you should be doing and how frequently you should be doing it.
Yeah. Yuck. Yeah.
So yeah, I was spared that, thank goodness.
That's when I'm like, yes. I'm like, but I know there's like tons of talk. And also like, I think we have another somewhere, we have, it's so cute, a clip of us talking about like marriage seminars and things like that. But there was a lot of like kind of, there's a weird way they talked about sex in a very weird, just didn't feel like, it was just kind of weird. I don't know, like
It
almost
was like,
it wasn't spiritual.
no,
it wasn't clinical. It was a means to an end, and there was a lot of sisters, and it wasn't just like sex, it was dating. If you don't want the brothers to struggle, if you don't want your husband to struggle, then you need to whatever. And I'm like, that's not my responsibility. But
yes.
there was a lot of that pressure put on, and I'm sure it was put on guys too, but it was definitely put on women.
It was.
Ugh. Yeah.
And aside from the fact that, we there was no dating people outside the church.
No.
And there was only dating people inside the church if you went on double dates.
Yeah.
And if your dates were approved by the people higher up in the chain.
Yeah.
And there was certainly there was no going steady or getting engaged unless both of you were scrutinized and deemed to be on the same level of spirituality or sharpness.
Interesting, right?
Yes. And the people in charge of you thought that you basically would benefit the kingdom as a couple.
Right. Which is really sick in so many ways. And
It
I
is.
don't think I would never, the whole time I was like campus and high school, I don't think I ever went on a date with anybody who wasn't either I was told they were going to come and ask me and they needed encouragement, so I needed to say yes, or they were told that I needed encouragement.
Exactly.
Like there was never a person I was like, wow, that person, I'm really interested in like hanging out with them. That was this makes me shake. I don't know why. It just gets under my skin because it's this completely inauthentic way of learning life and social skills.
It is.
And
so true.
And it's like you can't trust yourself. And we know how you're doing. And like seriously, it's like arranged marriages. It's like matchmaking. And there's somewhere on here, it's like permission required for major decisions. And that includes who you like whether you want to go on 2 dates with somebody in a month. You had to get permission for that.
It's true. Or, once people were going steady or dating exclusively or engaged, they had to get permission. Like they were told how long they could talk on the phone every day or how many times per week they could see each other and what they could talk about. That's true. And the stuff they couldn't talk about was the stuff people really should be talking about before they decide to commit their lives to each other.
Yes. Might make you struggle or make me realize this person is not who I want to marry.
Exactly.
But it kind of makes me wonder if it's that intentionally didn't serve 2 purposes. And maybe the more important purpose was we don't want them to break up. I mean, how many people, how many couples the whole time we were at church did you ever know that broke up?
That broke up.
That were went steady, were serious. And then didn't get engaged and get married.
I'm trying to think. Very few.
Yeah. I'm like, I think 1 or 2 maybe.
Yeah. And it was a big deal if that happened.
It was awful. It was just so awful. Yes. And I was always like, that guy had to do something wrong. I don't know. I don't know what his problem is. That's a little bit of honesty. But yeah, it was like, ooh, and then it was this whole thing where it was like, they're struggling. Like what's wrong with them spiritually?
Yes.
Which
not just dating is for getting to know people and they got to know each other and
they can still be friends. Right.
Big deal. Yeah.
Right. Like normal people, or they just hate each other's guts, and that's fine too. Like
That's, yep.
like, but there was none of that. Yeah. Like it's just is. But everybody was so invested, and like their leaders were so invested in the outcome of everything and how there were no divorces, and it was almost like once you started, like once you were going steady, you were as good as married.
It's true. It reminds me a lot of so the homeschool community that we belonged to when Zach was in high school. There were people who were not our close friends, but people who were like one relationship removed from our close friends who practiced courtship.
Yeah.
And it's very much like that. I don't think there was much matchmaking going on by parents, but parents had. The more I think about it, the more dating in the ICOC reminds me of the courtship model that acquaintances that Bowers practiced when we homeschooled Zach. And parents didn't put kids together in couples, but if a boy wanted to date a girl, he had to ask her dad's permission, and then, or not date. Oh, dating was a bad word. Oh. If a boy wanted to court a girl.
Which is so funny, right? It's just a word.
And courting was a very serious thing. It was like a pre-engagement.
Right.
And so the expectation was you're going to get married.
Yeah.
15-year-olds.
Right. Like no pressure.
Yes.
Like, good.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But it was very much like that. Like once you got the okay to go study with someone,
it was
that was a big deal, big commitment. Yep.
Yeah. And I remember like whenever Ethan and I met, I was like, look, we date for 6 months. We're married in 6 months, because that's the way this is done, because that's the way it was done in church.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember that? It was just like bam, bam. Like,
yes, it was fast.
Yes.
Because you don't want people to struggle.
Know each other. Right.
That too.
And I'm like, well, why would, when everything fell apart, did everybody get divorced? Well, they hated each other. And they didn't know how to communicate.
Exactly. They hadn't formed an authentic relationship with each other.
No. And it goes into the whole, just all of it. Controlling who you have sex with, when you have sex, controlling where you live, how you live, the way you do things, like the fear of punishment. They make you separate from your family. All of these things that are on this list wind up with you're living with someone, and even if you like them, even if you love them, you were never given the opportunity to like problem solve on your own and come up with your own ways of doing things. Yeah.
Another thing, excuse me, another thing that's controlled is the way that you resolve conflict. And the way that looked inside in a marriage of two disciples is most of the time, if one of the spouses was upset about something or had a problem, they told their discipler, and their discipler told the discipler's spouse, who then talked to the spouse of the couple where there was conflict. There was people did not learn. No, they didn't learn how to resolve conflict in their marriage. Or just be honest with each other.
Right. And that actually goes to friendships as well. Like you were set up with friends and your discipler, who was supposed to weirdly be like your magical friend all of a sudden. And I'm like, I'm pretty much afraid of this person. So there's that.
Yes.
But like, even then it's like, when did you ever hear of people having conflict? Like,
it's true. I heard of people being corrected or rebuked, but I didn't hear much about people just working through things one-on-one together.
And I'm like, when you're in any organization, any group of thousands and thousands of people, and just a group of like a couple hundred high school kids or campus kids, you should be hearing about fighting and disagreements. Like that's something that's natural. And if you don't hear that, that's a gigantic red flag.
It's a big red flag. Yeah.
Yes. And you should see husbands and wives sitting and having serious conversations after church or before church or leaving and out going out there. And you should see spouses sitting together and looking like they shouldn't be interrupted. Not you see him and the husband over there, and then the wife and they're having a serious conversation. I'm pointing, separately.
I can see them. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I can, like, and I'm like, I can actually hear what's going on. I can, yes. Like, that is what we saw. And you would know, that's how you would know they weren't getting along. Not because you saw them talking to each other. And that is sick. That is sick.
It is.
Because you're looking at it like, and like the real fascinating thing, right, is like, so they're relying on their disciplers, who are usually they're a married couple, usually married, discipled, married. But then that the people who are discipling the bottom couple who's having the conflict, when they have conflict, they get the same thing from their disciplers, who get the same thing from. So it's this weird top-down way of teaching everyone how to not resolve
relate
and
to
resolve.
each other. Yeah.
So it's all controlled. All of it is controlled. And I never really thought about that before like that.
Yeah, there's a chain of command that you have to follow in your marriage.
Yes.
Which is insane.
Down to the way you are taught to like talk to each other. And it makes total sense, because like you're supposed to imitate your discipler, who imitates their discipler, and it goes all the way to the tippy top. And I'm like, this is weird. You're not individuals. If you're all, especially the women, you're all talking the same way. The mannerisms are all the same. You dress the same. Like, it's an on here somewhere. There's no room for the individual.
It's very true.
And that's behavior control. It's crazy.
It is.
Yeah, it is. What are other ones that,
so I think, that really sums it up. Rewards, permission required for major decisions. Rewards and punishments are used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. Rigid rules and regulations are imposed.
And that's from the beginning. That's like, what's a disciple? How often do you meet with the kingdom? Anytime the kingdom meets, you must be there.
Yes.
Like, there's no question. There's no like, I can't make it. If your job gets in the way, you quit your job.
Quit your job and find one that works with the church's schedule.
Yes. Do you know how many jobs I turned down because I'm like, sorry, I can't work Wednesday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, all day Sunday. They're like, well, when I'm like, I don't know when I can work. Like, that's a good point.
Let me ask my discipler.
Right. And there's what?
That's it. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the other thing that's really interesting is I was looking at regulating diet and the manipulation of sleep. And they didn't really, the diet thing really, well, you weren't told what to eat and what not to eat, but they did impose fasts. We're all going to fast. And so it was like, you couldn't go like, I'm not fasting. Oh, by the way, I don't do well when I fast. I get hangry. And like, I don't like that. Like, I'll fast from something like reading. I'll fast from school. But you had to at least say that you did.
Yes.
Because otherwise you'd be in trouble. And then with the manipulation and deprivation of sleep, you were expected, you stayed as late as whatever activity went, and then you stayed later, which meant a lot of times in high school and in campus, we were out till like, for high school, I think we were out till like 11 o'clock on school nights, which for me was late. And then you have to get up in time to have your quiet time in the morning before you go to school. So that's a manipulation of your sleep. And then they would do like weird like prayer chains where you would like be assigned a time. Like, do you get to choose your time? No. You were assigned a time when you would pray. And if it's in the middle of the night, tough luck.
Then you're out praying.
Yep. Set an alarm. Which to me, I'm like, that's a manipulation of your sleep. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but when people are sleep deprived, it's so much easier to control them.
It is.
So
And we were, another way to manipulate people's sleep is to keep them so busy that they don't have time to sleep. So, being up late on church nights is an example of that. But even things like, things like being in studies. Like if you're studying the Bible with people that you're trying to convert, usually that's in the evenings after work. A lot of times you're up really late doing that. And again, up in the morning for your quiet time before school or work. Making phone calls, because you had to call your discipler every day. You had to call, theoretically, if you were inviting people to church and you got to call your visitors. You got prospective visitors, you were calling and following up with your visitors. There was always extra stuff that you were doing. And if you had free time, like if I had free time, I didn't tell anybody because I knew that they would give me something church related to do.
Yeah, I don't think I had any free time. Like, because the other thing that everybody needs to remember is this is not the only thing you do. It's not like you don't go to school and you don't have a job and you don't like try to function. It's all of this on top of it. So I'm trying to go to school and I'm trying to work and I'm trying to study and I'm trying to have some kind of like recreational time for something, like anything. And then, but it's like this, and then it's like, you know what? This person needs a ride. Do they live near me? No. You got to go get them. Are they going to give me gas money? No. So there's your controlling of your finances.
Yes.
And your time. And then after a date, you have to make cookies and write a card. I'm like, I'm freaking tired because I just suffered through that date. And now I have to find something nice to say. But I will say I'm really good at writing thoughtful cards. But you are. Not because of this though, because that's not how I felt. But it's like piled on. And something else that's really interesting is the amount, and I guess it's behavior control, emotion, maybe it's more on the lines of emotional control, but the amount of anxiety and like fear. I didn't sleep because I was so anxious. Like I was so afraid every day that I made a mistake and I was going to hell. Like constantly.
Yes. Or that I didn't reach out to somebody that I should have reached out to and they were going to hell because of that.
Oh, this gives me the shakes. So, and that's what we're talking about, where it's like, you can look at a list, but under each, like 25 of these and under most of them, there's a lot more that goes into it than just something so simple as like manipulation of your finances. So it's what makes it so harmful and at the same time so hard to identify. So, and on this list also, I think we should probably note encouraging and engaging in corporal punishment, which that was something for children. And up until this point, I guess I wouldn't have really realized kidnapping, torture, rape, all that stuff was on here that it actually kind of applied. But after looking at the lawsuits, it seems as if perhaps
at least a portion of members experienced really, really extreme abuse.
And it's important to say too, like part of like, for me, the foundation, the very like lowest point, the foundation of all behavior, like I need to control it. And that means I need to give or not give consent. And literally, I was in college taking women's studies classes before I was like, what the hell? Like, oh, like consent, that's actually a real thing. And it's important. And it's my power. And at the time, I think I was probably still in the church.
I was like, I was way after college before I realized that.
I was studying all sorts of women's studies stuff and abuse and whatever. And I'm like, what the crap? I was still in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like didn't put 2 and 2 together. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the church instilled dependency and obedience. It was
That's
just that
true.
was just like your new operating system. So
Yeah.
you didn't think about it. Yep.
Joyfully, immediately,
And fully.
and I'm like, joyful. What does joyful look like when you're not feeling joyful? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And that was, yeah, whatever. Anyway, we could go on and on and on and on.
Smile and clap up high when you clap to music.
Gosh. And you had to swing your elbows back. And I'm like, do you know how exhausting that is? Like, I love singing and I love music, but
give me a break.
Yes, you couldn't clap low. I forgot about that.
It was, unless you fit a very narrow personality type, there was no authenticity. You weren't allowed to be your authentic self at all.
No. That's what got you in trouble.
Yes.
This makes me shake.
Sorry. Should we move on to information control? So the point of information control